The era of the PS2. It was a time of experimentation, Y2K-laden fears seeping into the aesthetics of those early titles, with things mellowing out as genres got more comfortable in their fancy 3D settings. But it was also a time of weirdness, where developers tried out some more risky ideas, moving outside of their areas of expertise and expectations to try something new. Fast forward to 2005 and the arrival of not one, but two fighting game-inspired beat-em-up action games from the teams behind Tekken and Soul Calibur, with one being Death by Degrees, a game with some interesting assets.
Williams.
And the other one being Urban Reign. Urban Reign has some pretty obvious fighting game DNA built right into the bones of its bones. You can sort of tell it's made by Namco since it's got the trademark "guy spins in the air when you yeet him" move, and the general weight of everything hits that home even more.
It's hard to convey with words and video clips. You just kind of have to jump into Tekken 4 or 5 to see what I mean. Oh no. We have homework.
Now, Tekken at this point is no stranger to a beat-em-up. Tekken Force in Tekken 3 and 4 is a cool mode where you beat up nameless henchmen until you have to try and beat a named character from the main roster. Then you get slapped eventually and go right back to the start and learn to be better. But these modes are still using the same gameplay from the main fighting modes. And in Tekken 4's case, that makes the mode feel a bit weird to control at times. It's quirky and fun, but I'm not entirely sure a whole game with this sort of movement would work as a 3D brawler. So Urban Reign forgoes that, which is expected, and goes for something that makes a little more sense for a 3D beat-em-up. Full 3D movement, full camera control complete with lock-on, and it all works pretty nicely. There's satisfying rumbles and cluttered warehouses and tactical tumbles and claustrophobic subways, creating harmony between the classic slapstick joys of action with the mind games that these little rat traps allow us to play with our opponents in a fully 3D space. The sumptuous delight that is taking on a group, a gaggle, a horde of enemies as just one person, or maybe two, is a thrill like no other. In fact, the one versus many archetype is one that is pretty often used in a lot of different things to showcase power, struggle, and determination. That no matter how hard the fight is, you will pull through and take out anyone in your way. You can reach your goal, and all it'll take is shoving a guy into a microwave. But most games usually make this a pretty one-sided affair. Kiryu is not getting murked in a random street fight any day of the week. These guys are just cannon fodder at the best of times. But to go against the grain, Urban Reign makes it a point to brutally and willfully kick your ass at any given time. Enemies will gang up on you, punch you while you're being grabbed, team up to suplex you to the ground, and hack you to pieces with whatever they have on hand. These guys do not play fair, and every fight you are in is one where you have to fend for yourself and claw your way to the top. It is fast, it is challenging, and it is oh so fun. I failed at most missions when I tried them at first simply because I underestimated how much these guys wanted to kill me, and as soon as I acclimated to their bloodlust, I was able to supply my own.
I will not lose.
You need to play extremely aggressively to get out of most fights, but that also needs to be balanced with awareness. You can't just spam out random attacks. You need to be decisive when using combos and attacks that can catch enemies off guard or interrupt before, during, and after one of their combos.
Urban Reign feels snappy, decisive, and punishes you for making pretty simple mistakes, but rewards you handsomely for reacting appropriately.
It does the thing that all action games should do on paper, which is blend your offensive and defensive moves so smoothly that you eventually start playing the game based on reactive instinct, where you enter the flow state that's uninhibited by stiff controls or pretty useless inputs, and instead makes every tool in your arsenal a valuable weapon. I cannot overstate how smooth the core gameplay is here. Sending out combos and alternating high and low attacks while peppering in some grapples, all the while dodging and parrying the attacks of the enemies around you, is so smooth I couldn't believe what I was seeing half the time. I genuinely have not played a beat-em-up or action game that feels quite as smooth as this. And yes, I got my ass kicked a lot, but nothing feels as sweet as getting bullied and then tackling the bully to the ground and making today his worst. That's not to say that Urban Reign is a perfectly constructed experience with no flaws because there's definitely some annoying stuff, yada yada yada. But here on Ghoulie TV, here we celebrate the PS2 action games that time forgot and give them the spotlight that they deserve. Regardless of their ups and downs, in spite of the reputations they have, we give these games a clean slate and accept them for who they are. And Urban Reign has some fucked up shit in it. Towards the end of the 100 missions in the main story, you get thrown some pretty stinky challenges. Hell, the first half of the story isn't much of a cakewalk either, since you don't have all of your cool abilities yet. Stuff like running up walls and then following that up with a Hurricanrana, which is absolutely useless, but it's cool as hell. But that isn't unlocked straight away. Same goes for some specials, mid-air grabs, and not to mention the fact that your stats are pretty poopy at the start, all pretty much guaranteeing you'll have a bad time in some of those levels against certain goons. Jake, in particular, is a bully. That man suplexed me so much I saw God, and you know how much I hate seeing God.
Now, ask yourself this question, and don't worry, it's rhetorical. Do you like games where you get to do a stone cold stunner in a rainy parking lot? Listening to mid-2000s grunge? Well, if the answer's yes, then have I got the game for you.
The main story plays out like a true 80s or 90s action movie with a hero that's an expert fighter going up against an impossible threat. Brad Hawk, the most American name I've heard in my life, is a brawler for hire and is hired by Shun Ying Lee to find a kidnapped gang member in the city of Green Harbor, a fortified city in the US that obviously has some darker shit going down behind the scenes. Eventually, spooling out into a tale where the obviously insidious politician is the bad guy, because of course he is. Look at him. There are a few twists and turns where enemies become allies and new foes emerge from the darkness and speeding, exploding trucks. It's a pretty run-of-the-mill tale, and the game doesn't waste much time trying to tell it. You get these short blurbs before each mission that give you a shred of context for what's about to go down, which usually plays out like, hey, there's this guy doing something and he needs to be taught a lesson. Sharpen your pencils and get ready to shove them up his poor attitude. The kind of minimal story isn't really a knock against the game per se. I don't think a great story is always necessary in something like this. If the structure provides interesting encounters in the gameplay, then that's all that really matters to me. And Urban Reign makes it pretty clear that all of this stuff is simply context to carry you from fight to fight. In fact, this mission structure is just Armored Core if you think about it. Fleshy, gang, warfare, Armored Core. We've even got names that sound like they're from Armored Core. You can't tell me that Napalm 99 isn't the third AC you take out in the arena. There's also obviously such strong Escape from New York energy here aesthetically, mixed in with a little bit of the juice from the Warriors, I'd say. Hell, we can just throw every stereotype of the streets here and you'd see that every base is covered. Almost every element of Urban Reign's aesthetic is there to capture that grimy alleyway in New York sort of vibe, which is something that we've moved away from since the heyday of the PS2, and I gotta say, I miss it. I get that this was just a place we went to a lot in the mid-2000s, like how the Dreamcast had beautiful blue skies and wonderful sunny beaches, or how games had that obsession with zombies for a little while.
It's too much!
We go through these things, but it feels like this particular aesthetic hung around a little bit longer than you'd expect. Those grimy street vibes in games like the PS2 Yakuza's, Manhunt, Def Jam is one of those uniquely grungy PS2 things that made a lot of these games feel dirty as hell. And sure, I like games that remind me of summer days gone by as much as the next retro slanted YouTuber, but most of the time, I want games smelling of mud, blood, and piss like a real gamer, man. Rock, Flag, and Deagle and all that jazz, my friend. This has gone off the rails. Practically every subculture of gang is here, including the guys that really loved Eddie Gordo and became capoeira masters during their school lunch. Then there's wrestlers, karate masters, boxers, taekwondo, and Muay Thai experts. Oh yeah, and Laura and Paul from Tekken too. They're here as well. Throughout Urban Reign, you'll be fighting all of these guys a lot. So much so that some of them end up joining your team, where you get to team up and take on other named goons together. Before that happens though, you'll fight them one-on-one, or maybe a bunch of them at once. Then again in different areas. Then maybe one more time just to give them another chance. And when it comes time to adding some of these guys as a partner in a mission, you already know their strengths and weaknesses because you handed them their ass dozens of times apiece. And then the game really opens up when you get to switch who you're controlling as, allowing you to really get control of the fight and set up some cool grab attacks. This is a world where fighting isn't necessarily an entirely adversarial act. Sometimes it's the only way to truly know and respect each other. To find your place amongst everyone else, you need to get your hands a little dirty. And that's an interesting enough hook to add a ton of character to the story and general structure of the game, which is great because you will not find much variety here in terms of what you do moment to moment. Urban Reign has 100 missions in the main story mode, and most of these missions will involve you beating up some guys, or maybe beating up one big guy. But some of them will have fun objectives too,
like breaking someone's legs.
And while you do get a few new moves as you go through the story and get to put in some upgrade points to improve your stats, there's not a whole lot to chew on besides that. And I do sort of love how unashamedly simple that is. Kinda refreshing to have an experience be this focused. Though I also wouldn't have minded some missions that let me go for a stroll, because my god is this game tiring to play at 2 AM when the game starts bringing out the swords. Like I said before, Urban Reign is a difficult game to get used to if you aren't a certified pro gamer. It's easy to get overwhelmed if your defense isn't up to snuff, and defending yourself is easily the most important aspect of this whole combat system. Mastering the basics of parrying is how you get past 99% of the difficult encounters here. The 1% after that is luck, depending on whether the game wants your lunch money or not. A lot of the missions in this game have Brad go up against a gang of enemies, and this is where the game really shines for me. Because yeah, you'll absolutely get demolished on the first few attempts, but every now and then you'll enter that zen phase where you're parrying enemies left and right, seamlessly beating them off one by one, and doing these sick grab attacks where you take out 2 enemies at once. Like, this is all sick as hell, but really hard to keep up with if you easily lose attention, like I do. See, I could talk about all the cool offensive moves that Mr. Brad Hawk is capable of, but none of them matter if you don't cut through an enemy's offense first, which is what square is for. Timing the input just right allows you to dodge each attack from an enemy, escape grapples, and when pressed alongside the run button, you'll do a nifty little dodge roll. In order to dodge full combos, you need to press square for every attack the enemy throws out at the right time. Or you can press square and a direction at the right time to parry an enemy into a more vulnerable state, letting you punch or grapple them yourself. But simply knowing how to parry the odd attack every now and then is not good enough. A lot of the time, you'll need to parry a bunch of each other's attacks in a sequence back and forth before one of you slips up and an attack manages to go through, which results in truly delicious sequences like this, where the battle of the flow states truly begins until one person pops a special attack and ruins it. Special attacks negate everything I just said because they can't be parried. They're essentially just emergency safety nets. And therefore on the one hand, this is a fighting system that hinges on execution and takes practice to learn and a lot of time to truly master. But then you can just throw in some unga bunga special moves that completely go against those core lessons and get by a lot of fights without much problem. Sure, they cost meter to use, but it only takes 2 bars to use the simplest move, and that's enough to get you out of a jam most of the time. And when an enemy uses them, the only way to avoid it is by stepping or dodge rolling away and hoping you don't get hit. But you'll often get slapped with one of these during an offensive push as the enemy tries to bounce back, and really I have to admire the effort here. These special moves are really there to give you a fighting chance when you've taken too much limb damage. Next to your health meter, you've got a little icon showing your body that has 3 main regions: head, upper, and lower. To target these, you can press up and down on the analog stick while attacking to perform attacks that specifically target these areas. And once these start taking some damage, they'll go from green to yellow to red. Then the victim takes more damage from these regions and starts getting dazed more regularly after getting smacked a bunch. And that's obviously a very bad thing to happen in a game where the tides can turn so quickly. Special moves take you right out of this though, with the neutral special being this flippy explosive kick that knocks enemies back and brings you right back to the fight. I get why it's here, but I can't help but feel like it's a little bit of an easy way out in a lot of situations, but frankly I do think this game needs it. Urban Reign has the tendency of being an extremely overwhelming game at times, be it 1v1 or 1v-many. This mainly has to do with the fact that learning those parry timings is often based on luck for some of the more extravagant moves. Not saying that you can't learn these timings naturally, because you absolutely can, especially in a 1v1 battle. But when you're up against a crowd and they're all ganging up on you, it's basically impossible to mind game your way out of certain situations. Now, at least one person is going to be in the comments right now saying, I can beat this game without taking any damage at all. I speedrun this game. I'm so good. Good for you. That is so cool. That's so good. That's great. There you go. I gave you the gratification you were so clearly starved of as a child.
You're welcome.
What really sets Urban Reign apart the most is, ironically, its low-budget, schlocky approach to being a PS2 beat-em-up. For some brawlers like the Bouncer or even Yakuza, big stories come alongside the simple framework of beating up dudes in an alleyway. Hell, in Yakuza's case, there's this whole other game focused on exploring the world, playing minigames, doing side quests, and then there's the core brawler DNA that comes out to play every so often. Then there's games like God Hand, which is an incredibly deep action game with an ever-moving skill ceiling. There's an extravagance or indulgence with these kinds of titles that makes them feel more impressive in terms of scale or substance, which puts games like Urban Reign in a cool position because of how simple and unrefined it is. It's cool, it's great that games add so much more to the concept of a brawler or beat 'em up, and evolving the trademarks of a genre like that are important for the longevity of a series in question. But it also highlights how important it is to keep creating experiences that are simple in nature, that focus in on what the game knows how to do well and sticks to it. This isn't an argument of a thing is bad and so actually it is good. It's more to say that Urban Reign is proof that not every experience needs to be these grand big events or cultural and historical milestones to still be appreciated in the here and now. It's a small scale game with plenty of repetitive elements that come together to form a tight and snappy brawler that will definitely have you sweating more than a few times.
And isn't that what we all want at the end of the day? Dudes settling their differences together and getting all sweaty until the job is done, until they're both finished. Anyway, guys, that's me done. I'm gonna go watch some wrestling. See you in a bit.